Hello, welcome to your second video on comma rules. This video is going to focus specifically on rules 7, 9, and 10. You may find it helpful to have your notes out on comma rules, and the reason that we have this second video is rules 7, 9, and 10 seem to be the rules that give students the most trouble. Yet, as a teacher, I also find these rules to be really the most useful for students to increase the complexity of their writing and change up and your style a little bit. So they're actually really useful comma rules, but they also can be a bit troubling. So I'm going to start with rule 7, and these are words and phrases that interrupt the flow of the sentence. They're interrupters. So sometimes it's necessary, but not always, to write a sentence in which the main information is interrupted by extra information. We just have to make sure we put commas around that interrupting information. Remember the trick with interrupters. Check to see if you can ditch the extra phrase. If you can, put commas around it. So I want to take a look at a couple of specific examples, though, just to help you see these a little bit more clearly. So the first type of interrupter we often see are appositive phrases. So we want to make sure, again, if these appositives are interrupting the flow of the sentence, we set it off with commas. So if we look at the example, my car, a Toyota Corolla, is brand new. My car is the subject. Is the verb. So the main sentence is my car is brand new. The positive is a Toyota Corolla. And keep in mind, a positive simply rename what comes before it. So a Toyota Corolla is renaming my car. I need to offset it with commas, though, because it's interrupting the flow of the main sentence, my car is brand new. In the next example, the bank manager, our next door neighbor, bought a new car. Again, if I'm not sure where my commas go, let me find my subject, let me find my verb, and say, okay, is the main sentence the bank manager our next door neighbor, or is the main sentence the bank manager bought a car? Once I know that, then I can say, okay, well, who is my next door neighbor? Well, it's the bank manager. So that's an appositive phrase renaming who the bank manager is. So we always want to use commas around appositives as they interrupt a sentence. Next, we're going to look at some other common types of interrupters, and we're going to look at how these interrupters interrupt the flow of a sentence. So you can see that we have our shorthand for how we write our sentences, and then we have an example. So let's take a look. Oftentimes, interrupters interrupt the subject and verb. So if we look at the example, Charlie, as a matter of fact, is one of the best barbecue chefs in the neighborhood. I can find my subject, Charlie. I can find my verb, is. Immediately, I'm drawn to as a matter of fact. That is not essential information. I can cross it out and get rid of it. That means it needs commas around it. So I put a comma at the beginning of the interrupter and a comma at the end. Sometimes interrupters come after the verb, or they come after or in between two compound verbs in this case. So it says, I ran down the street, though I didn't have to, and fell down. So we have an interrupter after the first verb, but before the second verb. Again, I want to test. Can I get rid of it? If I can, and the sentence still makes perfect sense, I know it's an interrupter, thus I need commas around it. Another combination is where you just have an interrupter after the subject-verb combination, but before the rest of the complete thought. So if I say, she looked, much to her delight, beautiful. There's my subject and verb, but the rest of the complete thought is all the way over here. So my sentence is actually, she looked beautiful. Much to my delight, or to her delight, is an interrupting phrase. I can get rid of it, and the sentence still makes perfect sense, thus I know I need commas around it. Finally, one of the trickier ones is where you have an interrupter after your helping verb, but before the main verb. So an example of this is the CEO was, needless to say, dismissed from the company. Well, CEO is my subject. Was is my helping verb. How do I know it's my helping verb? Well, my main verb is over here with dismissed. So if my helping verb and my main verb are being interrupted by a phrase that, again, I can get rid of, I know it needs commas around it. Okay? So some tricks to help you figure out those Rule 7 sentences. A few more items to look for would be transition words and dependent clauses. Now, we've seen these before when we did sentence patterns. However, these types of words and clauses have more than one job. And in this case, these transition words are not connecting independent clauses. They're interrupting a single complete sentence. So I still need to just use commas around them like I would with any other type of interrupter. And then here I have dependent clauses that are interrupting an independent clause, so I need commas around it. We didn't do that with sentence patterns, but it still applies. The police officer, there's my subject, here's my verb. The dog, here's my subject, here's my verb. So even if I just kind of look at how the subject and verb are related and I don't even recognize the dependent clause, I still know it's going to need commas around it. All right, now we're going to move on to Rule 9. This is where we have extra material at the end of a sentence. And the first thing we need to keep in mind with Rule 9 is the sentence structure. Your independent clause comes first, then your comma, then your phrase. You'll have to excuse my spelling as I write on the screen. I'm a little bit messy. But this is the format of a Rule 9, okay? Look for keywords. Some of those keywords are going to help you denote that extra material. And again, if I'm not sure, I always want to find where my independent clause is first, then find where my phrase is. So in the example, she likes using comma rules, especially rules 7, 9, and 10. I have lots of commas here, but only one of the commas is comma rule 9, and that's this one right here. This is the end of the complete sentence, the independent clause. However, I'm adding additional material, okay? What is this additional material about? It's about the comma rules. I'm emphasizing which rules I really like. Super extra bonus credit, imaginary bonus credit, if you know what comma rule that is. I'll give you a second. Did you say items in a series? All right, that's what it is. Let's look at the second example. All the classes are important, including the ones in the morning. Here's my comma rule 9. Because including the ones in the morning is just extra material. All the classes are important is my independent clause. Notice each of these examples has one of those clue words, especially, including. Pay attention to those. They'll help you out. Another reason we use Rule 9 commas are to either separate a statement from a question or to separate contrasting parts of a sentence. You want to think in this terms, those negative expressions, right? So I can go, can't I? So this is kind of the statement part here, and this is the question. But notice it's a negative expression. She did say that, didn't she? This one is the affirmative statement. This is the negative question. Or in this case, the contrasting idea, that is my money, not yours. Still negative expressions at the end of a sentence. All right, moving on. The last rule that I want to take a closer look at is comma rule 10, introducers. And the most helpful thing I can tell you about introducers is know the different types of common phrases that are used as introducers and always know where your sentence is, because introducers are like the opposite of comma rule 9. Comma rule 10 is where you have the word or the phrase at the beginning of the sentence, hence the capital P in phrase. Then you have your comma, then you have your independent clause. So it's kind of the opposite, but that's the structure for Rule 10. So the first phrase I want to look at is adverbial phrases. And as a reminder, adverbs end with ly, okay? And when we see those at the beginning of a complete sentence, we need to go ahead and follow up with a comma. So if I say sadly, we still have more examples to go. I know my comma goes here because first I recognize sadly, but if I go ahead and note my subject and verb, hence noting where my independent clause is, it shows me here's where my clause starts, so my comma goes in the front. Same thing with gladly, I will try to speak faster. I is my subject, will try is my verb, so that's where my independent clause begins, and I always get a comma after my introducer before my clause. Another type of common phrase are the participial phrases, and these are in your notes, but this is where we have the ing or the ed words at the beginning of a phrase. So if I look at my example sentence, going to the market, I found all the ingredients for my recipe. Going to the market is my participle phrase. It's not a complete sentence. My complete sentence begins with I found, so that's where my introductory comma goes. Same thing with the next sentence. Exhausted by the beach is my phrase. My complete sentence began with I fell, hence my comma goes in front of my complete sentence. The next type of phrase we're going to look at are transitions. We keep seeing these transitions all over the place. We can use transitions at the beginning of a sentence. We can use them as Rule 7 interrupters. We can use them to connect two independent clauses. These words are hardcore. They have lots of jobs. If you're going to use a transition word or expression at the beginning of the sentence, do me a favor, put a comma after it, okay? At the end of the day, we still know our subject is here. We know our verb is here, so introducers always need a comma between the introducer and the complete sentence. Just note to self, transition word, complete sentence. You have a whole list of those in your notes on the writing process, so don't be afraid to use them. We also have single words, okay? Yes, no, well, all these get separated commas. So yes, I completely understand comma rule 10. That's a single word expression that introduces the complete sentence. Completely understand. Or no, I have no clue what you're talking about. Again, here's my subject, here's my verb. So in this case, no is my introducer. So again, with these one-word expressions, just make sure you use a comma after them. The last one I want to look at are infinitive phrases. And infinitive phrases is where you have the word to plus a verb. Okay, and when you begin a sentence with an infinitive phrase, you have to use a comma after it. But again, the same rule as before applies. If I'm not sure where my comma goes, figure out where my complete sentence starts. You need to take Route 1. Here's my infinitive to get to the mall. Next one, to find the polo outlet, you need to go to the information booth. So I get my comma at the end of my infinitive phrase at the beginning of my next sentence. Lastly, prepositional phrases. This is just a review. Prepositional phrases, we've seen them all over the place in sentences, and most of the time, prepositional phrases, do not get any commas, okay? If a prepositional phrase is at the end of a sentence, it doesn't get commas. If it's between a subject and a verb, it doesn't get commas. But when a prepositional phrase is at the beginning of a complete sentence, it does get commas. This is the only time you should have a prepositional phrase with a comma. So again, you have a list of prepositions in your notes on sentence patterns, so you might have to go back and look at them. So if I look at this one, about now, that's my prepositional phrase. You should have figured out. There's my verb. So this is where my complete sentence begins. Prepositional phrases do get a comma. After this tutorial, we are going to finish our homework. My subject, we, are going is my verb. So there's my complete sentence, and it gets a comma. Finally, with our help, you can get an A. Again, another prepositional phrase offset from the complete sentence with a comma. So I hope this clarification of Rules 7, 9, and 10 helped you out. Make sure you ask your instructor if you have any additional questions. And good luck with your writing. Try using some of these comma rules. Thank you.